just introduce you to one of our very, very special guest speakers and our guest presenters from the beginning of time, from the APM. Joanita, remember early days?
Yes, I do.
And the first time we ran it, we had a couple of people, and we said, well, we're going to run it anyway. And with people like Maria around, it's become an absolute pleasure. And thank you, Joanita. So just for your guys' sake, Joanita is, as I say, is one of our long-term favorites. She is an absolute genie in software development and in agile. So, but on and what I like with you, Anita, always is she's not telling you about just the methodology of agile, but also the truth, and that's always good to know what it really is. And so, Joanita, as I say, is a project manager first. I don't think she really cares if something is agile or waterfall or wagile or whatever. I think the first time I heard the word wagile was from Joanita. It's like, and guys, you will enjoy that presentation. As I say, Joanita has done an amazing software project. Just to make you all jealous and green, she's now in Spain. So I don't know how the Spanish is going on, Joanita, most probably quite nicely, but the kids are most probably speaking it fluent by now.
Prof, you'll be surprised. I first have to convert my South African driver's license, which means I had to go and study for my theory, write test like 3 times. Word. And now I have to go for driving lessons because sometimes we find that 18-year-olds are further ahead in life than what we currently are because we don't have driver's licenses. But my promise to myself is as soon as I've got this official driver's license, I'm starting to study Spanish. Yeah, and it's and I think, you know, just to interrupt you there, this is just show you how the world has changed as well. We almost don't need Spanish here because we're surrounded by people, most of them working from home for companies in the UK and Sweden and Finland. So all my neighbors are English. It's almost like, you know, I don't need to speak Spanish, but it's important to as part of the culture to be able to speak the language.
Yeah. So. Well, Joanita, welcome. So we've got a great class again this year. So if you don't mind, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Prof. And as always, it's lovely to be here. And I think when you say we've been here all along, it feels like, you know, it's just gone so quickly. And at least we haven't aged yet. We still look as good as we did a few years ago.
Absolutely. You're looking much nicer. We can see you in Spain. You know, not sitting with load shedding and stress.
No, that's true. I've got electricity and I'm very grateful for that. But anyways, guys, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, if you guys have questions, please feel free to write them down. If you want to interrupt, you're more than welcome to do that as well. I'm just not sure in terms of bandwidth. Do you guys want me to switch the video off? Oh, and can you see my screen? That's my next question. Can you all see my screen at least?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, excellent. I'm just going to switch over so that I can see my notes. So if there are questions, just maybe keep your hand up and then afterwards we can go through the questions if you guys are okay with that. Perfect. Great. So as I said, nice to meet you. Great to be here. I'm so happy. Thank you for the invitation. As always, I get very excited to talk with you guys because I know you're all passionate about project management and being through this course with Prof. Pete. I'm sure it's been quite an eye opener. So it's nice to be part of this journey that you guys are on as well. I know I've got a whole hour to talk, but I've got only 4 points, and sometimes it will take me 4 hours to talk about all 4 points. So you guys must just stop me if it does get boring. But like I said, I can get quite on a trend and run away with all these things because it is quite exciting. So just as introduction about Agile and Scrum, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of a story about Agile, and then just go very high level. What is Agile project management? What is Scrum? And then I've added a section this time in terms of trends that I've seen in Europe. So I've been in Spain almost 2 years now, well, a year and a half. And there's certain things that I've seen here that is starting to move in terms of agile and project management. And then afterwards, if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to just raise your hand and ask some questions. All right, so like I said, introduction, agile story. As I said earlier, I do miss South Africa, so I thought a nice African sunset would be a good picture to start the story off. But so what the story is, imagine you're planning a trip with your family to a national park. Let's say you want to go to the Kruger or somewhere nice. And being in Prof. Pete's project management class, you've planned this holiday meticulously. You've got a spreadsheet, you've booked your stay, you made a list of the places you want to go and see, what you want to do, how much it's going to cost, what time you've got your tickets booked. Everything is perfectly planned, what routes you're going to take, and based on your itinerary, you even have a packing list because your bags need to correspond to this holiday that you've got planned. So everything is based on the assumption that the weather will be fantastic. So on the day you arrive, the weather is perfect, just as you had expected. The first 2 days go according to plan and everyone is having a great time. However, on day 3, you wake up and there's this huge storm, and this continues the whole day, and the weather report says, sorry, for the next couple of days, it's just going to be miserable. So this is where the concept of agility comes into play. Rather than sticking to your original plan and insisting on going out in the storm, you decide to adapt to the situation and you modify your plans based on the storm and the miserable weather and everything else. So for the first day, you decide to spend the day in the chalet, playing some games, sharing stories, cooking, making the most of the situation. And then the next day you find out that, oh, not close by there's an aquarium or a museum or something that you've always wanted to see, but that wasn't originally part of your plan. You decided to say, okay, well, we can either get stuck in the chalet for another day and get bored and irritated with each other, because that's what happens when you coop up a couple of kids and the weather's miserable and you can't even chase them to go and get rid of the energy. So you go out because the weather doesn't improve and you end up visiting these places. And surprisingly, everybody ends up having a great time, especially because the kids have never been to a museum like this, so they love it. Now, on the final day, the weather clears up and you quickly go back to your original plan. You visit a nice spot in the park, you go and see some animals, and you end the trip on a high note. So in my little story about camping and going back to Africa, the bad weather is like an unexpected event or an obstacle, something that you frequently see in a project. So rather than resisting change and sticking to the original plan, you chose to embrace the change and adapted your plan based on the current context. So that is being agile. You expect the situation, adapted your plan, and end up having a great time. So this is what agile is being all about, to embrace the change, to be adaptable, and to make the most of the situation. So your ultimate goal was to have a great holiday, not necessarily to stick to the original plan, although you've had your spreadsheet and your checklist and everything else. So you wanted to have a good holiday, and you achieve this by being agile. So when you're working on a project, the goal should be to deliver value, and being agile helps us to do that in the face of uncertainty and change. And I'm sure for those of you who's worked on projects or who's just showed up at the office today, you might already know that there's always uncertainty and change and things like that. Oh, I see my slide didn't move on. So sorry, guys, you should have just stopped me. I'm looking at my one screen and I didn't see my the slides. All right, so as I said, agile is about embracing the change, being adaptable, and making the most of the situation. Right, so for some reason, my slides are just moving on the one side. Which slides do you guys see? Sorry, I'm just, because I've got the two screens here and I can't see.
The two agile project management, you climbing the wall.
All right, okay, perfect. And you saw the previous one. All right.
Yes.
No, because for some reason the screens are not in sync. So I'm just, apologies for that. Okay, so this is, we're just going to briefly talk about what is agile project management, what is the benefits, and also some of the myths, because there are lots of myths around agile and what it actually is. So what is Agile? Agile is the ability to move quickly and easily, the ability to think quickly and in an intelligent way. So this is just what the dictionary says. So it's about changing your plans when the weather changes or when there's an obstacle in your project. Another definition of Agile, Agile project management. Agile is a way to manage projects. As Agile realizes that projects are inherently unpredictable, it also embraces the unpredictability by breaking down projects into smaller chunks. This approach makes it easy to prioritize, add and drop features mid-sprint. And I think what we've seen that often, you've got a client who wants a specific product or features, and then once they start seeing what it looks like, they say, oh, but actually this is not going to work, let's tweak it that way. So instead of saying, sorry, we have to stick to the plan because this is what you wanted, you can change your features mid-sprint. And I think that's the beauty of having an agile philosophy or an approach to project management. So just another definition, this is from Agile Project Management for Dummies. Agile project management is a style of project management that focuses on the early delivery of business value. It involves continuous improvement of the project's product and processes, scope, flexibility, team input, and delivering well-tested products that reflect customer needs. Right. So the Agile Samurai, sorry, I don't know why this is, okay. So the Agile Samurai and Agile. Agile is a way of developing software that reminds us that although computers run the code, it's people who create and maintain it. Agile is a framework, an attitude and approach to software delivery that is lean, fast, and pragmatic. But Agile is no silver bullet. Who knows what this feels like? It's almost like going on holiday, you've got everything planned, and then all these other things happen. So this is, I think, 99% of the life that we currently live. You think you've got it all sorted out, and then something changes. So this is definitely, for me, one of my favorite pictures when it comes to describing projects. Okay, so what is Agile? Agile is... sorry, guys, you break big problems into smaller ones. Oh man, for some reason, my thing is just not working today. You focus on the really important stuff and forget everything else. You make sure that you deliver what actually works. You ask for feedback often. You change course when necessary, and you become accountable. Would you guys mind if I just reshare this? Because for some reason, I'm struggling to get the...
100%, Joanita. We see what you say though. So, but you obviously see on your side what you want to do.
Yeah, so I'm just for some reason my slide, my note slide doesn't change when I move on here. So that's why it seems like I'm moving between two presentations here. Maybe what I can do is I'm going to switch my camera off if you guys don't mind, because then at least I can look at my big screen, which will be a little bit easier, if you don't mind.
100%, Joanita.
All right, thank you, Prof. Okay, so I think that will, okay. All right, so in summary, what Agile looks like is to have, instead of working on this big chunk of a website, you break your website into smaller pieces so that you can get value. So you might have a home page that you create and you can launch your home page. You've got maybe a little bit of a blog and you can start blogging. So instead of waiting for the whole website to be finished, you start launching it in little bits and pieces. Or like the cartoon on the right-hand side, instead of just having a wheel and then have two wheels, maybe you start off with a skateboard and then you add features to it until you actually have a car. So it's about how you design your products and how can you deliver it in chunks so that your customer can get the value out of it sooner than later. As I said before, Agile is a mindset. It consists of a manifesto or values. It's got certain principles that it adheres to, and then the different practice and flavors and methodologies of Agile. It's not just a one-size-fits-all approach to project delivery. This is just a high-level overview of the Agile values. So it's about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So this value says that it's important to have that connection with people and the way they work together. So processes and tools are important, but it's the people who actually create and use them that truly drive a project forward. Good communication, collaboration, positive work culture, all those things are important in Agile projects. Working software over comprehensive documentation. It's not saying that you don't need documentation, and I think we'll get to that when we talk about the myths. So the Agile approach values functional software over extensive documentation. Do you have a feature that works? Can my customer use this feature? Instead of having a lever arch file with specs and graph in designs and data things, we do this on user stories or a product vision. There are different ways in terms of documenting what it is that we deliver. You don't need files and files of specs. So as I said, doesn't mean that documentation is important, but Agile teams aim to spend more time on developing a working product and less time on creating exhaustive upfront specifications. So I think that's also part of the whole principle values of Agile. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So it doesn't mean that you should just chuck your legal department out of the door and say we're not going to have contracts. Of course, you need that. But Agile focus on having an ongoing relationship with a customer that invites their active involvement and feedback throughout the development process. So instead of just signing the contract, running away, do the project, and then come back and tell the customer what you've done, the customer is part of your process. You have daily conversations or check-ins, and you can always course correct in case of things changing. And I think working together with your customer also shows them that you've got their best interests at heart, and you're not just here to bill them an astronomical amount for them to have a half-baked software that they didn't really want. So I think that's sort of also the importance on that. Then responding to change over following a plan. Agile accepts and embraces change as a natural part of any part of life, whether it's software development, whether it's HR, or doesn't matter, planning a holiday. So instead of rigidly adhering to a set plan, Agile teams stay flexible and adapt their plans as necessary based on the feedback, new insights, or even changing circumstances. If you guys have to think how quickly it's already 3 years, but 3 years ago, everybody had to all of a sudden be able to work from home. And a lot of people have never worked from home. But because of that agility, it was able for people, people were able to actually continue working while we were all in lockdown and things like that. So that is, today we live in such a world where we've got no choice but to be agile. Just quickly, Agile is sort of your umbrella term or philosophy, and underneath that you've got Scrum, Wet Agile or Wagile, like the Prof said, Kanban, Scrumban. There's the Spotify model, there's SAFe, there's all sorts of different things under the whole Agile word. So it's not just Scrum. Okay, so just a couple of benefits, myths in terms of Agile. Sorry. Once again, my computer is not going to the right slide. Okay, so how can we benefit from Agile? And I think I need to just say that Agile is not the silver bullet. There are scenarios where you need to follow a rigid project plan, where waterfall is the best approach. So it doesn't mean that because there are all these benefits in Agile, it's the only way to do projects. And I think that's important because some people, there's the saying, the only tool you've got in your toolbox is a hammer, every problem is going to look like a nail. So, and I think that's sort of one of the concepts we need to have is Agile is one of the approaches that we can use, but sometimes it's not the right answer for the type of project you're working with, the customer, or the team that you're involved in. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, there are great benefits to Agile, but it doesn't mean it's for every project. Some of the benefits include increased customer satisfaction. As I said, you're working with your customer, they know what they're getting, and you can tweak and change things as their needs change. Enhanced transparency, because Agile is about transparency. You'll see when we look at Scrum, one of the Scrum values is being transparent. People know what you're working on, people know what the issues are. So transparency is absolutely critical, and there are no surprises. You're not going to have a demo and then all of a sudden people find out, oh, but you're working on the wrong technology or you've done the wrong features. It's everybody knows who's working on what are they building towards, and what is the outcome. And you also make sure that you get better continuous feedback. So if somebody thinks that you were working on the wrong thing, because of the feedback sessions and the demos, you can quickly change or course correct. Improve predictability, because you know what a team can deliver in a sprint, whether it's a 2-week sprint or a 4-week sprint. You can plan better in terms of what it is that you will be able to release at the end of a quarter, or whatever the case may be. Better team morale, because we're not constantly putting pressure on people to perform and to deliver and work long hours because there's specific deadlines. Teams are a little bit more focused on doing more balanced work and having a bit of more of a life. But not just that, people are not forced to work together, but people work together, they're open with each other, have the courage to tell each other that, listen, I don't like what you're doing, or I don't like the way you've done things. And that all builds in terms of your team's morale. And not just that, also seeing what you deliver. So not waiting 2 years for a product to go live, but maybe putting workable features into production every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks does build the team's morale as well. And then focusing on continuous improvement. One of the key things of Agile is to say, how did we do this sprint? How can we make it better next time? Does this feature work? Is this what the client wants? No, it doesn't. Then let's change this feature. So we're always looking at how we improve. And then better response to change. I spoke a lot about change and responding to change. So it just allows you to course correct or change plans if need be. So just in terms of the reality about projects, I'm sure you all have learned this lesson. I'm sorry, I've missed a slide here. Oh, there's my myths. So Agile myths, just in terms of Agile myths, like I said earlier, it doesn't mean that there's no documentation. You still need documentation. You still need to know what's happening. And so that's one of the myths. No, Agile involves no planning. I think one of the first things that Prof. Pete said after I did my presentation at the university a couple of years ago, Agile almost involves more planning, because you really need to know what it is that you're working towards and say, what is it that you're prioritizing? What are you working on? So you definitely still need planning. You still need design, architecture. You can't just shoot from the hip and say, okay, well, let's see if this is going to work. You still need design and architecture. Agile can solve any problem. Huge myth. There are some problems that you cannot solve with Agile. So like I said earlier, it's not for every project. So it's not something that you can just say one size fits all. We're going to do Agile for everything. And then Agile is only relevant for software development. Also not true. I see so many other departments in my organization specifically doing Agile. Our HR department has got their own Kanban board. So if I want something from HR or from finance, I log a ticket and it goes onto the board, and they've got people, taking those Kanban tickets and running with the queries that comes in. So it's definitely not just a software thing anymore. Just in terms of projects, I'm sure you've all seen this before. So it's impossible to gather all the requirements at the beginning of a project. I think this is something that I've seen so many times. People have got this vision of what the software product is going to look like, but as you move along, they change their mind, or they need a different report, or this screen doesn't work anymore. So you can never get all the requirements at the beginning of a project. So whatever requirements you do gather are guaranteed to change, because I've seen it so many times. You find people that say, oh, this is what I want. And then you build it for them and like, oh, maybe we should tweak it like this, or no, I don't want that there. And, so things do change, and that's just the reality. And then there will always be more to do than what time and money will allow. So it's about prioritization, knowing what you want to do. Okay, so that is Agile. If we look at Scrum, so Scrum, as I said, remember that picture with the umbrella? Scrum is just one type of Agile methodology. I'll just give you a very brief overview of what Scrum is all about. So Scrum, it's just a definition from Peter Hundermark. He wrote the book Do Better Scrum. So Scrum is a framework within which complex products can be developed. It's an incremental approach to developing a product through successive improvements. So it's a framework, so it doesn't tell you it's a template or something that you have to use and it's cast in stone and you have to do it in a certain way. It's just a model that you can use in complex projects, and it just allows you to do things little bit by little bit in an incremental approach. And then every time you do something, you improve it a little bit. So this is what the definition of Scrum that I really like. Mike Cohen, he's written so many books about Scrum. I think if you guys are interested in learning more, follow Mike. He's got lots of presentations on LinkedIn. I actually really enjoy his work, and he makes it simple because sometimes it's very theoretical. Mike's stuff is very practical. So this is a quote by him. He said, "It doesn't matter how good you are today. If you are not better next month, you are no longer agile." And I think this boils down to what we said. It's about continuous improvement, making sure that next week you're better than what you were with the previous sprint. Just a couple of characteristics of Scrum. So in Scrum, you divide your project in small logical chunks. You then execute in short iterations or sprints. Your sprints are time boxed and has clear goals. So in the beginning of a sprint, you know your sprint is 2 weeks. You know exactly what you want to deliver by the end of those 2 weeks. So we're not going to be distracted and bring in new features or other things. What is in the sprint is what you work on. That's your goal. You've got self-organizing teams, so you don't have managers telling people what to do. The team decides who does what, how they run with the project, and how they're going to get to their end goal at the end of the sprint. Requirements are captured as items in a list, so that's your product backlog. You've got a long list of things that you need to do. So it's not files and files of specifications. There are no specific engineering practices in software Scrum, but I mean, it depends on, obviously, my reference is specifically to IT projects, but if you work in a different area like HR or finance or operations, there can also be different ways in approaching Scrum. And then you operate in an agile environment to deliver projects. Loads and loads of companies are using Scrum. These are just a couple of examples. I'm sure I can add quite a few more now, but from my experience in South Africa, I have worked with some of these companies, and some of them started off with Scrum and it evolved to doing some versions of Agile. But these are some of the big companies who are currently using Scrum in their work. Okay, so just as a high level, you will hear Scrum has got certain values, their principles, and then you've got all these things like roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. So I'll just give you a very brief overview. What I'm going to cover probably in the next 10 minutes is probably a 2-day course. So just understand that I'm rushing through. There's so much more than just this high-level overview of what this presentation allows. So your Scrum values is courage, focus, commitment, respect, and openness. So courage is about the team members having the courage to do the right thing and to work on tough problems. We've had at a previous company that I worked in, when we just started with Scrum, I think courage was one of the key things that blocked us from moving forward in terms of that, because we would have our sprint planning, put certain things into our sprint and say, this is what we're going to deliver. And then the CEO walks in there and then he wants something different. And because nobody had the courage to stand up and say, sorry, Mr. CEO, we cannot add this to the sprint because the sprint is already closed. We used to take on additional work. And at the end of the sprint, people would feel so tired, demoralized, because either they work themselves to death to make the sprint goals, or they just drop some of the other things because they had to focus on the things that they didn't have in the sprint in the first place. So courage is important. When people are not pulling up their socks, stand up and say, listen, we really need you to come to the party and share it. So that helps the team also to be better, and it builds trust, because if you trust your team members, you'll have the courage to give them feedback on what they're doing. Focus is part of the design of Scrum, because you're putting certain things in your time box sprint. Your entire team knows this is what we focus on. We're not allowed to be distracted. When you have a good Scrum Master, the Scrum Master will make sure that you've got to get rid of all those distractions so the team can focus on what they actually need to do. Commitment is absolutely critical in Scrum. You have got people who decide this is what's going to go into the sprint, and because everybody is part of this decision, they are automatically more committed to delivering this. But they also need to be committed to each other, so that if somebody can't deliver, they help each other and they're committed to the bigger goal, not just the bigger goal of the sprint, but to the project, the product that they're building on, or the organization that they're working for. So commitment is also one of the key values of Scrum. Respect. Scrum team members respect each other, and I think it comes back to that courage. If you trust people and respect people, you'll have the courage to speak to them. Respect is important. You need to you'll have a self-organizing team, for example, where somebody who might be a very young junior developer is really good at doing UX design or front-end development, and he will need the respect from the more senior developer who's never done that kind of work, because if the job requires the team to deliver something, you'll need the different parts of the team to deliver to directly. So there's no place for egos and people who are more senior. It depends on what is it that you can deliver in the team, and people need to respect you for that. And then openness comes back to the transparency that we spoke about, openness to each other in terms of, put my hand up, sorry, I don't know how to do this, please help me, or I need help with this task, I can't do it. Openness in terms of what are you putting on the board? Is the work that you're doing visible? Is the failures that you're having visible? Can we learn from these? So openness is actually quite a big concept in terms of how you deliver Scrum. And like I said earlier, it's literally a 2-day training course just to go through these basic concepts. So I'm definitely not doing justice to this. Just in terms of what a sprint looks like. So as I said, you've got the different roles, you've got ceremonies and artifacts, and we'll go through that just now. But a sprint will have all the tasks necessary in the sprint to actually deliver the project. So you'll do planning, development, and planning, analysis, development, and testing in one sprint in order to produce a deliverable or a shippable project or value to your customer. It's no longer where you've got some planning up front and then you've got a BA coming in and do some analysis, and then 3 months later the developers start working on the project. Everything happens on a continuous basis in a sprint. So just in terms of the Scrum framework or the Scrum process, I'll just, talk about this. So if you look at the top, you've got your vision, which is the vision for the product or the software that you're going to deliver. You've got stakeholders. So those are the guys with the money who says, okay, we're backing up this product. And the product owner is the person who knows what needs to be done. It's the person who talks to the customer. It's the person who has got the input in terms of what this product will need to look like. And then you've got your team, which is your developers, your Scrum Master, and your product owner. So this is all part of your Scrum team. So your product owner is almost like the voice of the customer. And in Scrum, these people are all part of one team. It's not a product owner or customer versus the deliverable team. So based on this vision of this product, you've got a big product backlog, which is basically a list of stuff that needs to happen in order to make this product. And every sprint, there will be a meeting where we do planning. So we look at the product backlog and we say, okay, what are the most important things that we need to do first? That gets prioritized. And then we say, okay, of these things, what can we get done? Let me actually just move to the next slide for you. So you've got your big product backlog. During your planning session, you say, okay, this is what we want to do at the end of this sprint. This is our goal for the sprint. And then out of that list, you take the items that will help you to get to this goal. So it might be 3 or 5 stories, depending on the velocity of your team, how much can your team do in one sprint. And then that is what goes into the sprint. During the sprint, there's certain meetings or what we call ceremonies that take place. You've got your daily stand-up and so on. So the guys will work on this sprint backlog in order to deliver first of all, the sprint goal, and then the sprint goal will eventually add up to having this deliverable or shippable product that we have. And the key is to deliver value for the customer. So whatever you put in your sprint, can you deploy it? Is it something your customer can use at the end of the 2 weeks? And sometimes it's not. Maybe you need 3 or 5 sprints before there's something that your customer can use. But always think about what are the chunks of work that we can do together that will add value for my customer. Okay, just in terms of the components of Scrum, so we spoke about roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. So just in terms of that, you've got, roles, you've got your product owner, your Scrum Master, and your development team, which is part of your Scrum team. Your ceremonies, sprint review, sprint planning, your retrospective, and then your daily Scrum or a stand-up that you have every day. And then artifacts, I've just listed 3 of the main ones, but there are quite a few more. So it's your product backlog, your sprint backlog, and your task card. So we just briefly touched on that when we looked at the process. All right, so in terms of Scrum, like I said, your Scrum team, your product owner is part of your team. It's no longer your external person who's the customer and who's shouting at you for not delivering it. The product owner is just as responsible for delivering as the rest of the team is. And then stakeholders can be your customers, it can be your sponsors, it can be a whole lot of other stakeholders that will benefit out of the team. Right, so in terms of the product owner, so just briefly, product owner, this is the person who represents the customer and decide what gets built. Her or his primary job is to take care of the business side of the project and the only source of truth for the project. Often there are people with questions. What does this feature look like? What do you want to see in this feature? The product owner will give you that answer. What I've seen, and I will talk about trends a little bit later, but one of the things that I've seen in companies in Europe is that the product owner is also the business analyst. So they often have a BA/proxy PO role. So this is how some of the things have changed here. So, whereas in South Africa, a lot of the projects I worked on, the BA was part of the development team, whereas here the BA is almost the product owner. So I just thought that was quite an interesting change. Okay, development team, this can be anything. It can be developers, it can be testers, it can be an architect. So these are the guys, which is a cross-functional group of people that can turn the customer's requirements and turn it into software or in a product, whichever way they're working on. So, like I said, BAs, testers, database administrators, and anything else that needs to convert those stories into working software. Just for time, I'm not going through all these other points, but I will share my slides with you afterwards in case you want to go back and just have the content available. Right, then Scrum Master. I've heard some interesting names like Scrum Mother or Scrum Monster, but the Scrum Master is basically the person who's supposed to look after the Scrum process. he or she is a servant leader and needs to protect the team from distractions and also keep the team focused on the sprint commitments or goals. So once again, Scrum Master also has a wider organizational role where it needs to help the organization to adapt to Scrum or an agile mindset. So it's obviously team focused, but also in terms of the organization is a bit wider focus as well. All right, just quickly, Scrum ceremonies. Those are the meetings that we call Scrum ceremonies, and they are time box events that occurs during a sprint. These ceremonies are important elements of agile delivery and is part of the process. So it's not something that you can, if you take it out, you change the process in a way. And it's not just meetings for the sake of meetings. It's not a case of death by meeting. You try and have certain meetings. It's very focused. You know what you need to get out of the meeting, and try not to distract the team with any other meetings during a sprint. So it's a framework for your teams to get work done in a structured manner, to set expectations, empower the team to collaborate, and to drive results. So just a couple of meetings. You've got your sprint planning meeting, where is the session where you get together and you look at the product backlog and say, what do we take out of this product backlog into this week's sprint? So it helps you to set the goal for the sprint and to look at what needs to get done next. Then you've got a daily stand-up, which is your quick 15-minute meeting. Sorry, let me just grab some water. This quick 15-minute meeting where everybody gives an update and on what is working, what did you do yesterday, what are you working on today, and any blockers or impediments. And this is also where the team can discuss, how can I help you? How can I lift this blocker? Or for the Scrum Master to see, oh, I need to run and go sort this out. So it's an update meeting. In theory, if a team works very well together, anybody should be able to give feedback for anybody else. So a team should always know what the rest of the team is working on. And that's where the whole transparency thing comes in. And then at the end of the sprint, you've got your sprint review meeting where you showcase what you've done in the sprint, get feedback from your stakeholders, find out if they're happy with what you've delivered or is not in line with what their requirements were. And then your retrospective meeting is a meeting where you actually says what worked, what didn't work, what can we do better. So this is your focus on continuously improving the way you work. All right, so those are the key ceremonies, and just in a typical 2-week sprint, this is what you will look like. You will have your daily stand-ups every day, and then you'll have your retrospective, your planning, and your demo meeting 1 day a week. So your team is actually opened up to sit and get some work done instead of just sitting in meetings all the time. Okay, just quickly, artifacts. So artifacts is basically the stuff that we produce in Scrum. So that can help you with decision making. It helps you to have transparency, so people know what's working, what you're working on. It helps you to keep track, and there's also that whole myth of Scrum has got no documentation. Comes out here because there is still some documentation. It might not be as elaborate as it would be in some other projects, but you still need to document things and then makes your work visible and transparent. So you've got your product backlog. We spoke about that. That's just the big list of things that will make up your product. Your sprint backlog is the small list of things that you're going to work on in the next 2 weeks. And then the task cards or user stories is individual tasks that breaks down the features, helps you to define what will done look like, does this thing look like when it's finished, and then also give you like a size estimate to say it's a 2-point or 5-point estimate, or depending on what measurement you and your team use for that. The other artifacts, impediment log, burn down charts, product vision, sprint goals, not going to touch on them just for the sake of time. And then I think one of the other things that we did speak about is the whole thing about planning and how critical it is to plan and to make sure that you've got your things prioritized. This is just, humorous. Weeks of coding can save us hours of planning. But the other side is also true. I think a couple of hours of planning can save you weeks of coding. Right, almost done, and then we can move over to questions. Just lastly, some trends. I think, as Prof said in the beginning, I've moved to Spain, so and being in this global world, it's quite fascinating. Although I'm based in Spain, I work for a company in the UK. My boss is in Ireland. I've got team members in Spain, UK, and a couple of people in India as well. So it's a very global company. I've never been at my client's office. I think most of my developers haven't been to the client's office. So we work very remotely. And I think this section is just things that I have seen specifically from my experience. It's not necessarily grounded in any theory, but if I have to compare my experience in South Africa to what I've seen in Europe, these are just a couple of things I've picked up over the past 18 months. I think, the one thing that I think one of the important things is scaling Agile. I've seen a lot of organizations trying to scale Agile principles across the entire organization. So it's, like I said earlier, it's not just IT anymore. This is for HR, finance, marketing. Even executives are starting to look at more an Agile approach to doing work. Scaled Agile, all those things are growing in popularity. So it is definitely something that I think is speeding up in terms of just getting entire organizations to be more agile. Remote work, distributed teams, like I said earlier, my teams are all over, and that is also a big thing. And I think it's going to grow more and more. People probably don't want to go to the office anymore because they realize that they can have that work-life balance, but also they're more productive when they don't have to be stuck in traffic. And everybody is online in any event. So even if you have to go to the office, you're going to be the only person there and you're going to have to dial in any event. So I think that's also a big thing that I've seen in Europe. A lot of people working remotely, and also people moving to cheaper countries. Because they work remotely, they don't need to pay high rent anymore because they can work from anywhere. So I think that's also one of the big trends I've seen. Also, if you go into LinkedIn or any of those job boards, there's a great demand for Agile and Scrum skills and experience. Lots of jobs for Scrum Masters, Agile Delivery Managers, Agile Project Managers. So I think that is also one of the trends I've seen. I mean, just type in Scrum Master and you will see lots of jobs popping up all over Europe. And then the other big thing I've seen is also there's no real preference for specific Scrum qualifications. In South Africa, certain job posts were specific and say you need to have a PSM or you need to have a certified Scrum Master. PMI has got an Agile qualification. Yeah, it's not specific in terms of qualifications. I do think, having that Scrum qualification is important, but having experience in Agile environments, working on Agile teams is what companies are looking for more. And it's not just Scrum Masters anymore or project managers, it's even developers, architects, testers. A lot of, I think my clients specifically are always asking when we put new developers in a team, do they have Scrum experience? Do they have SAFe experience? So it's the preference is for having that experience. It doesn't matter what job you do of late. And then Then the other thing is, so more trends I've seen, Agile coaching, mentorship programs. There's a strong drive to make people better at their jobs. It's a different approach in terms of making sure that people have got the skills to do their job. People are a lot more patient in terms of helping people to get better. So I think, there's informal mentorship programs, formal mentorship programs. Everybody's trying to help everybody to bring out the best in them. So that's also something that I've seen quite often in terms of Agile coaching, mentorship programs, even just general project management formal and informal, women in tech drives, helping, females helping others to get better in their tech jobs. So those are big trends here. And then lots of conversations of late around how we can embrace AI, how AI will change our jobs, how can we use ChatGPT to make ourselves better. Oracle, for example, has already got a module in project management where you've got a project assistant. So this assistant learns from your basic tasks, and then it starts telling you, oh, you need to send out a reminder for people to update their timesheets. And so it's almost like having an AI project assistant, as part of your work environment. So AI, definitely big conversations happening around this. The whole purist thing, I think, is diminishing. A couple of years ago, people were very married to say, I'm married to Scrum. Scrum is the best, or you have to do safe, you have to do that. There's such a blend of agile approaches that you can't just say there's a pure Scrum team anymore, a pure agile team. There's a lot of, even in one company, you might have one team or one product team working on Scrum, and then another product team working on Waterfall, because that is the way that they need to have this project delivered. So there's definitely a lot of blend methodologies or combined methodologies. And then I think Matrix is big. I think a couple of years ago, people were just doing burn down charge, and they thought that was it. But a lot of measurement around Agile I've seen. So you can have looking at what your team's progress, what is the productivity, team morale, quality, predictability, defects. There are so many things that people are measuring nowadays. So I think that is basically some of the trends I've seen. I'm sure there's a lot more, but this is what I want to touch on. And just to close off, I like this quote: there's a big difference between being agile and doing agile. And I think it's a mindset about being agile. Even if you don't work in a Scrum team or whatever, just think about, how can I be agile? How can I always try and improve and be better in terms of how I deliver? All right, and that is me. I'll switch on the camera again so that I can see you guys.
Thanks, Jenny.
Any questions?
I want to ask you a question, but I just want to say something that I've been finding, and especially because we're doing an enterprise program office now for FirstRand. They consolidate all the financial departments, so FNB, R&B, and everything. And it's interesting to see how agile has become. I know it sounds stupid, but it's really turning in from sorry to sound like an engineer, but from a concept to a process. People are starting to say, okay, I understand what a product backlog is. And then if in that specific area, they say, but guys, a product backlog, we can have a 9 months product backlog, but we can only have a 3 month Scrum backlog. And all of a sudden, people see these things not as shooting from the hip or as an excuse. And I mean, one of the things about 3 weeks ago, somebody says at R&B, we do waterfall, we don't do work breakdown structures. We only do work breakdown structures. I said, well, if you don't have an end date, it's a product breakdown structure. Did you know that? Like, no. I said, so you didn't actually know what a product breakdown structure is.
Yeah.
And now they're all doing product breakdown structures. It's like, I think people are understanding from the, like you say, the purist was maybe because you learn a methodology, you try and implement the methodology, and then the tail wags the dog a bit, and then companies start adopting what works for them. and yes, the methodologies are really cool tools, but it's not the philosophy. And like you say, the people is still the philosophy, and they agile, and it's just nice to see how it isn't an argument anymore about no, you mustn't do waterfall. It's like, no, it's tell me what, and I'll tell you what would work better. And people are starting to see that,
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so that's
and I think it's fit for purpose, because, for example, my client has got a couple of Scrum teams, but they needed to deliver a specific piece of software, and they used that piece of software delivery as a waterfall because they had to have an end date, so that all the other product teams could fit into this data store thing that they were building. So I think that was
I
fit for purpose.
use it. I mean, you are one of the agile gurus. You are. It's a statement.
Thank you,
And yes, a couple of years ago, one of the conversations you said, I need a good waterfall project manager to do a IT project. And then it's so true, isn't it? In IT, we try and do agile. And the other thing I think you're saying 100% as well is agile has moved from software development to process development. In other words, like you say, agile, HR, finance, all of those kind of people are starting to say, it's like, well, I'm not developing a software program, but what does a software program do? It automates my process. So why don't I use agile in the process? Because then it's easy to then automate it as well. So yeah, it's moving quite nicely. Yeah.
Definitely. Right. Any questions?
Questions for Joanita?
Right. Okay. We've got a hand up there. I just.
Sorry, Joanita.
Yes,
oh yeah, Kevin. Sorry, I couldn't see the name. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, hello. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for that. I think it was very insightful. I have just one question. That is, in your approach or in your experience with, the agile approach, ever found any issues with like having documentation after the fact, and now you have to produce documentation for the agile process after you've like done completing a piece of work?
So, I mean, you will still have your user stories, because your team will have a little card to say, I have to build this feature. And on that card, it will say, what does this feature look like? There may be some bit of a design. And when I'm talking card, it's like, it's probably on an online platform, because nowadays we don't do the cards anymore. And that card or that user story will give you, what does this thing need to look like? So you will have certain features, and it will also have what we call a definition of done. How do we know this thing is done? It will work, it will be placed. So it helps your testers also say, what do I test this again? So your documentation, you almost need to have the story before you can build it. I mean, if you want to put it later in some sort of a document to say, these are the features we delivered and this is the user stories, I mean, it's a bit of a, I mean, I'm sure if you like admin, you can do it afterwards and put it, but I think my thing is just, you've got 5 stories to deliver in the next 2 weeks. While you've got those 5 stories, put it in your document, then at least you've got it, because you don't want to, I mean, the whole idea is for you to improve efficiency. So why do you want to spend your time documenting things after the fact if you can just do it as and when you're busy working? So I don't know, does it answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, it does, because in my experience, I find that when audit comes along, they always have an issue of where was this documented, where were the requirements, and then we always try to tell them that, look, the solution of delivering what the customer needs is more important than a policy or whatever the case may be in terms of a piece of document. But we always try to show them that we do cover our risks. We do evaluate the process through and through, and when we do deliver the product, the customer does test it, they do check it. For us to go back and have like a tick box exercise sometimes looks fruitless, but I do see the value in it, but it just becomes like a headache point sometimes.
Yeah, so I think just to give you some tips. So what we used to do is that the Scrum Master would send out an end of sprint report, and it would be a 1-pager. So you've got, let's say, for example, your burn down chart there to say, this is the velocity of the team, and then it will have the tasks that we worked on, and then you can just have like a tick box, delivered, signed off, deployed. So you almost have a table to say, with list of tasks, and you can have like either with marks or with a green, orange, red, say this was delivered by the team, it was signed off by testing, signed off by the client, this was deployed. Then you've got almost just a 1-page to say, this is what the team worked on for the sprint, and you've got the sprint dates there, and then you've got that visibly. You might want to have a numbering format, so you could call it sprint 1 or whatever, and then user story 1.1, 1.2, or you might have some other different format of numbering it, so you can always trace it back. And everybody's seen the report. That's your evidence that you've delivered it, you've signed it off. So I don't know, that maybe that's something that can work instead of you having excessive documentation and then testing sheets. I mean, they can always refer back to the testers, because the testers will usually have screenshots to say this has been tested, it's working. So if they want to, you can always attach it to that, to have it in a central filing system. For every sprint, have a folder. Sprint 1, there's your requirements, and this is your sign-off sheets. Don't overdo it, don't overcomplicate it. Just make sure you've got your proof so that you don't deploy things that wasn't signed off, for example. Okay, does it help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. Kobotlo, did you want to ask a question? Any other questions, guys? Ntabi Singh.
Hi there. I just wanted to find out if there is some level of superiority between a Scrum Master and a product owner, because you mentioned that the UK, the Scrum Master is more in demand.
See, so with Scrum, there are no titles or authority or things like that. It's about everybody's working together to get the job done. If you're asking in terms of from a career perspective, or so let me just understand, is it in terms of the team, or are you thinking what would be a better career choice to do, product owner?
From a career perspective.
I think it depends on yourself. So it's two different people in a way. Your Scrum Master is somebody who's going to look after your team, who's going to look after your team's interests, who's going to look at implementing Agile across organizations, quite more coaching personality. Whereas a product owner / BA is somebody who likes to say, okay, this is the product. How can I design it? What is the features look of this product? Let me go and speak to the customers and find out what they want. So it's two different kinds of animals, if you know. So I don't think there's one that's better than the other. It depends on probably what your aspirations are and where are your strengths in terms of what you feel that you will be able to do well.
And I think what Joanita was saying there as well is there's huge opportunity in the Agile space. You know, not just one JD in the space. As people working in the Agile space that understands what agility is about and what Agile culture is about, that can adopt the different Agile, whatever principles they are, it doesn't really matter, but can adopt them. That's where the big opportunities are like.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, for example, in our company, we've got people who comes from a finance or HR background who becomes project managers, not because they necessarily have studied any project management, but they've got the skills and they're trainable to be in a specific way and to deliver things. And I think that's what it's about. It's about your skills and your interest and do you want to do something? So it's not limited to what you've studied or what your background is. Stephen, sorry, Ntabi Singh, does it answer your question?
Perfectly, yes. Thank you.
All right, pleasure. Stephen?
First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's really insightful.
It's a pleasure.
One question I want to ask, from a corporate culture point of view of adapting to be agile, have you seen that change over the last few years and different European to South African aspect?
You know what, I don't know if there's specifically a difference between South Africa and Europe, but there's a difference from company to company. So I've worked in companies in South Africa where they think they're going to send people on a 2-day training course. Tomorrow we're all going to wake up and we're going to be agile. But nothing else changes. There's no structural changes. The managers don't change. We don't change the way we look at performance. We don't. So people still work on their own little hierarchies or their own little personal investments because nothing else has changed. So, and then I've worked in companies where everything is so agile that it almost too fluid. And people think that because we're agile, we can just change things overnight. So it's not a European thing or South African things. I think in Europe, and it also I think it boils down to trust. Companies that trust people adopt Agile much quicker than companies who don't trust their people. If you just think about during COVID, the companies that quickly started working from home were the people who actually trust their people to work from home and to do what they're supposed to do. Where there was a lack of trust in companies, it was a complete disaster, because you had managers checking up and you had people having to submit daily reports on what you've done every minute of the day. So yeah, I think it's a more company culture thing than a overall thing. I don't know, Prof. Maybe you also have quite a lot of experience, so maybe you can add to it.
I found exactly the same with the New Zealand and Australian companies, right? Where those students will say exactly the same thing. And it's normally when people adopt the philosophies of Agile, it always works. When they think it's a silver bullet, like you said, first sentence, it's not a silver bullet, they'll tell you Agile doesn't work. It's like, no. You thought exactly like you said, I can send somebody on a 1 week Agile course, and then if I send them an extra week, they're also a Scrum Master. And that is just, and everything can happen in 2 weeks' time, because that's what the methodology says. But I think companies more and more are starting to realize when they're Agile, they can stay with where the consumer is, because the consumer is Agile, right? And the consumer will keep on changing the market. And I think they then start seeing the benefits now.
Yeah, no,
and
definitely.
you said something else now, which I wanted to comment on, which is also like definitely, but now I've forgotten. But I think the thing is, it's changed from a methodology to a philosophy. People, this nonsense of sitting next to a good salesman on the plane, but that's good IT salesman. It's always been, it's like, put it in, what did they call it, vanilla, and then people realize that no, vanilla is actually a very expensive spice.
It's a swear word in some companies.
Exactly,
I'm telling you,
exactly.
as soon as you mention vanilla, people think that you're swearing at them.
What I wanted to say, Joanita, one of the things that I saw, one of the New Zealand guys that I was, he's a Agile at their Vodacom or their Vodafone, and he sent me a thing saying most companies that already had Agile mindsets adopted to COVID working from home easier because they were already managing what people did, not where they were. And if you think about it, it's true, isn't it? Because in Agile, you don't care where people are. I remember at one stage you said, no, I actually send some of the programmers home so that they can focus, right? Yeah. And I think that's another thing that Agile does. It measures what happens, not where people are.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then you can work from anywhere.
No, definitely. But it comes down to trust.
Yeah.
And often companies don't trust their people, and I think, and then that goes on to, but how are you recruiting people if you don't trust them? So maybe you should look at the way that So it's so broad. I think it's almost a strategic conversation. Adopting to Agile.
I mean, you need to, if you don't trust your staff, it's a management problem, not a staff problem, right?
Yeah.
And people always say, but if they work from home and they don't deliver, I said, won't you be happy? Because I promise you, those guys don't deliver at work either. You just see them.
Yeah, they're just faking it.
Exactly. Yeah, they must probably sitting there running another business there, coding some other guy's web page or something. You just see them busy and you think it's great.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's true. Stephen, didn't that answer your question?
Yeah, to some point. Thank you.
All right. Did you want us to delve deeper into it?
No, I mean, it's an interesting question, of how to work in an agile or create an agile environment. Obviously in different organizations and working across different structures across the world, you definitely pick up which markets or countries or zones are a lot more agile. I mean, we have a head office which only has one boardroom, but has 30 employees, because everyone works from wherever. We have people in Paris, the Middle East, Turkey, Morocco, so they have no office. But yet in other markets, we have a dedicated office for everyone to come to every single day. So it's definitely, I think, as you were saying, more of a management culture than an organization culture. And it's not a regional zone. It's an ability of a strategic direction of the organization.
Yeah, and I think what makes it difficult in South Africa is not a lot of people have got solar and all those kind of things. So although you might trust the people working for you, you know that they can't work because they're not going to have electricity for 6 hours of the day. So it doesn't necessarily say that we don't trust you, but we want to make your life as easy as possible. So rather come to the office, because at least you'll be able to work for 6 or 8 hours. Instead of just working tonight when you're supposed to be spending time with your family.
And
So I think that's also something. It doesn't mean that companies are not agile. It's just it's not possible because of the electricity and all sorts of other issues that there are.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. I've spent 10 minutes more than.
No.
So thank you.
No, thank you.
It's always lovely to talk to you guys, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Joanita. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Marie. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
And stay warm.
Yes, goodbye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.